to the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. I'm your host, Jake McDonald. Be sure to check us out on CharmCityBirdwatch.com as well as all of our social media, including Instagram, Twitter at CharmCityBW, and Facebook. And on CharmCityBirdwatch.com, we, of course, had a bunch of series previews and series recaps for the Orioles as they come out of the All-Star break and look like a shell of their former selves, losing 3 straight and facing the Texas Rangers tonight. And also, I wrote an article last week about why the Orioles should sell at the trade deadline. So please go and check that out. Lots of great insight. Spent a lot of time researching and preparing that article, so I would appreciate if all of you listening to this podcast went to that website, to our website, and checked out that piece. And of course, as always, you're listening to this podcast through either iTunes or SoundCloud. I wanted to first apologize for the lack of content recently. Busy with the internship as always, but have run into some unexpected computer problems. My laptop had something wrong with it 2 years ago, and the same issue is popping up. And I'm in the process of buying a new computer. So if there is a lack, and I'm also going to be going on vacation next week as well. So if there's a lack of content within the next few weeks, probably really in between the next 2 weeks, I wanted to apologize for that. I'm going to try to get some more stuff up this week. We'll see how the computer cooperates with me, transitioning it from a PC to a Mac. So keep that in mind. And also, once training camp starts, I plan on hitting this really hard. I have a lot of guests lined up. I'm supposed to do more recording this week. We'll have Nolan and Tyler, having Tyler on tonight, our 2 correspondents from Charm City Birdwatch. Just bear with me as I, not only go on vacation, but get a new laptop as well. And I'm going to start experimenting with some new podcast software. So we'll see how this all shakes up. But I really want to hit the podcast hard as we get into football season. And of course, tonight, part of football season, training camp for the Ravens at least begins a week from Thursday, so 10 days from tonight. And as part of the preseason, that also means that fantasy football starts with a bunch of mock drafts. All that's going to be getting underway soon. There's going to be a lot of people already on fantasy, checking out the rankings and already doing mock drafts as we get into late July. A lot of hardcore fantasy experts already doing it, including the guy I'm about to have on, Tyler Fieser, who is, of course, one of our correspondents here at Charm City Birdwatch. He's going to be our lead fantasy expert this season, providing fantasy insight not only for himself but to share to all of our Charm City Birdwatch listeners, as he is an experienced, dedicated fantasy football player, and he wants to expand his knowledge to others. So this podcast is dedicated to Tyler and his insight on fantasy football. You can follow him on Twitter at Tyler_Fieser, and we want to welcome him to the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. So welcoming in Tyler into the podcast again, Tyler_Fieser on Twitter. So Tyler, as you have an article up, it was posted a couple days ago up on Charm City Birdwatch. So is your title officially the Lead Fantasy Analyst on CharmCityBirdwatch.com? So tell us a little bit about what you hope to accomplish this season with that role.
Yeah, so with the first season, I'm just hoping to really get the introduction and get as many viewers into the site as we can. Really, this will be the first time that I've ever actually done any analysis for others. I mean, I've done my own fantasy analysis for years and years, and I've been playing fantasy myself since about 2006. So this will be my 11th or 12th year doing it. So, I mean, I've got a lot of expertise and experience doing it, but like I said, I've never done it for other people before. So it's going to be sort of a test run, but throughout the season, I'm going to be doing pre-draft rankings, sort of laying out who I think might be some sleepers who might be on the radar to be potential busts, players I like, players I dislike at their current draft position, things like that. And then throughout the season, I'm hoping to get up weekly rankings, once again, players that I like and dislike, players to avoid. One thing I would like to mention that I did mention in my article is this will be strictly for season-long leagues. I will not be doing anything for daily fantasy. I know that's one thing that's becoming much, much larger over the last several years, and one thing that I myself got into this past season. But just because, like I said, this will be the first time that I've ever done any analysis myself for fantasy, I'm going to be strictly sticking to season long. So I won't be providing on the site. I won't be providing any daily fantasy advice. But if anybody out there would like any of my advice or just simply my opinion on a matter for daily fantasy, I'm more than happy to answer them on Twitter. So please reach out or just leave a comment on one of my articles that I'll post on the site. But like I said, I just won't be posting anything in any of the articles themselves.
Now, you mentioned in the article you wrote that you typically play in 12-team leagues, but there have been instances where you played in 14-team leagues. So to give our listeners an idea of the type of preparation you put into daily fantasy, give us like a estimate of, or not an estimate, but like an idea of how many mock drafts you do and how much research you do prior to fantasy season on everything that includes building a team, what players to take, how to rank positions, that sort of thing.
Sure. So funny you should say that. Actually, the last couple of years I've been doing mainly 12-team leagues, and I just found out this past weekend that my main league that I do every single year is actually going to be turning back into a 14-team league. So it's going to be a little bit of an investment again for me because I haven't done a 14-team league in I believe it's been 3 or 4 years. So like I said, it's going to be a slight adjustment, but not too much because the preparation is still the same. It's just obviously the rosters are not quite as deep in 14-team leagues as 12-team leagues because you're not going to be as deep at each position just because there's two more teams in each league. But as for preparation, I usually start this year. I actually started a little bit earlier just because I knew that I was going to be writing for the site. Normally I start midway through July, anywhere between midway through July and the beginning of August. I start my preparation, full-on preparation. Generally, I mean, for me, it's kind of a year-long process, just because for me, football never stops. So I'm always, especially like free agency and the NFL draft, I'm always taking into account how things shape and how things affect the fantasy realm. But I'm not doing full-on fantasy analysis during the draft or during free agency or anything like that, if that makes sense. So when I get into my full analysis, like I have been for the past 2 or 3 weeks or so, that's when I really start doing my mock drafts and everything. That's usually how I start. I try not to set any rankings before I do at least 2 or 3 mock drafts just to see where players are going myself, and see the players that I'm liking where they're going, the players that I dislike where they're going, things like that. And then I actually go in and I actually see where the experts are saying. Guys like Matthew Berry at ESPN, guys. I personally like Brad Evans a lot at Yahoo. I know a lot of people don't like Brad, but I love going to Brad. I also subscribe to SiriusXM Radio, where I listen to the fantasy station a lot during the football season. There's quite a few guys on the station that I really like. I go look at their rankings just to see where their opinions lie and see where their rankings are. And then I use their rankings and my personal opinions to compile my personal rankings. I go from team to team and I look at each individual team's rosters. And I basically say, what are the players that I might consider drafting? And basically put them in a giant sheet, labeling quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and I basically ignore kickers and defenses from the start. So after I've done that, I put them all into their own separate sheets, ranking them 1 to 32 at quarterbacks, and then however many running backs I have compiled through the 32 teams. Same thing with wide receivers, same thing with tight ends. And then once I'm done with my rankings, then I go back to continue more mock drafts until I finally determine a good strategy that I like heading into draft. The one thing that I don't like doing is having a set in stone strategy. I like having a strategy that I'm leaning towards heading into drafts, but I don't like having a set in stone strategy because I've learned over the years that things can go from your draft strategy is probably going to change by the time your actual draft comes around, because you can have a strategy going in if you know your draft position heading into your draft. If you say you're going to take a running back first round, say this year, say you want to draft, fifth or something, and it's looking like you want to take Julio Jones or Odell Beckham with your first pick, and you're like, I'm going to take Julio Jones or Odell Beckham with your first pick. But then say Le'Veon Bell drops all the way to you at 5. Well, in my personal opinion, I think you'd be kind of dumb to pass on Le'Veon Bell at 5. But if you're set in stone going into the draft, deadlocked on taking Odell Beckham or Julio Jones with your first pick, well, then you're kind of screwing yourself there. So you have to have an open mind going into the draft and not have a set in stone strategy. So you have to be open. But my preparation lasts about a month and a half every year heading into my drafts, and I always wait. If I'm the commissioner, I always wait until the last week before the season actually starts, just because I don't like dealing with preseason injuries as well. But I'm not against drafting before then if I want to be in a league and the commissioner wants to draft before then. So it does take a lot of preparation, but you can also succeed with having a little preparation if you do follow the league throughout the off season and everything. It's just I don't think you can do too much preparation. It's just the more preparation you do, I feel as though the more prepared I am, the better I come out feeling after my draft, especially over the last couple of years. I've never come out of a draft where I've absolutely hated my team, but I've noticed over the past 3 or 4 years where I've done a lot of draft preparation, I've really liked my team. And the past 3 years in the 12-team leagues that I've played in, that I've paid to be in, like I mentioned in my article that I put on the site a couple of days ago, the lowest I've finished in those leagues was second. I've finished second twice, and I've finished first in one of those years. So I feel as though the preparation has definitely paid off for me.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question for you about your rankings. You said on your article that the 3 most recent paid leagues that you played in were 12 teams, and you finished no lower than second. And then over the last 4 years in 12-team paid leagues, your finish was no longer no lower than third. So that was going to be my next question for you. So, as an expert in mock drafts and fantasy football, do you prefer? I don't know if there's any answer that's better per se, but do you prefer to draft early in the round, like if you're going to draft first and you're going to have a bunch of draft picks back to back? Would you rather be in the early of the round or more towards the middle of the round, more towards an end or the middle?
So I think personally it changes from year to year, but I would say majority of the years I think it's probably better I personally prefer to draft later in the round. Not necessarily if you're going to play in 12-team leagues, I wouldn't necessarily say 11 or 12, but I would say probably between 8 and 12. This year so far, from what I've gathered so far, I'm leaning towards wanting to draft anywhere between 8 and 12 or 8 and 14. Now that could possibly change, but generally I know most people like drafting at the end of the first round, just so they can get that turn and get their 2 players back to back. But it ultimately does depend on the year. But like I said, most years it's that people want to draft late in the first round.
And meanwhile, once again, Tyler Feeser, Tyler_Feeser on Twitter. Going to shift gears. Is there anything else you wanted to add on our fantasy session here before we talk about the Ravens a little bit?
Yeah, just one more quick thing, Jake. I did mention it in the article. If anybody is planning to put their complete faith in me, I would like to just say, like every quote expert out there, don't take everything that I put out there as the end all be all. Just because like like I said, quote, expert out there, everything that I put on the site is my personal opinion. And there will be many times throughout the season where I will guess that a player will bust a certain week, or I'll say that a player is going to go off and he won't. And I will be completely wrong. And I will own up to those mistakes each week. That's actually another article that I would prefer to do. I'm going to try to do each week is say where I was wrong the week before. I prefer not to see the hate tweets. Oh, you screwed me in a loss this week because you told me to play, or you told me not to play Julio Jones or something, and because he had a bad matchup. But when ultimately, I just like to provide you guys with the tools and the stats and my personal opinion as to where things are leaning and how I personally feel, when it's ultimately you guys that actually have to make the decision as to who you're going to play, who you're going to draft, maybe who you're going to cut for a certain other player, things like that. But like I said, I will be wrong throughout the season. I will own up to them, but it is ultimately your decision as to what decisions you're going to make. I'm simply the delivery system for the stats and the information and my personal opinions.
He is our lead fantasy analyst, Tyler Fieser, giving us the breakdown of his plans for this season in terms of fantasy and helping out all of our listeners at Charm City Birdwatch that are interested in having Tyler help them out throughout the season in fantasy football. Moving on a little bit, talking about the Ravens here. Of course, they open training camp in 10 days. Rookies report followed by the veterans. Then, of course, their first preseason game takes place on August 10th at home against the Redskins. A lot of questions, heading into training camp for the Ravens. We know most of them leaning towards the offense, while the defense looks pretty much set in stone with the exception of the middle linebacker job aside from C.J. Mosley. And then, of course, who's going to win the battles vacated by Timmy Jernigan and Lawrence Guy. But most of the questions lean on the offensive side of the ball. What is their offensive line going to look like? Are they going to sign a free agent, or are they just going to go in-house? Does Joe Flacco improve, 2 seasons removed from his knee surgery? Does the running game get going without a Pro Bowl running back with the addition of Greg Roman being a run game guru? Are they going to run the ball more with Terrence West and Kenneth Dixon? And Danny Woodhead now too, but he's primarily a receiver too as well as a running back. But is the receiving core going to take the next step of Jeremy Maclin now being signed? Are they going to be able to produce with Rashad Perryman? Is he going to be able to stay healthy and be a productive wideout? And who's going to be making the jumps at tight ends with Crockett Gilmore and Max Williams dealing with injury concerns? It appears that Williams might start the season on the physically unable to perform list. We have Darren Waller, who's suspended. Dennis Pitta's cut, obviously. Is Nick Boyle going to make it through the season without getting suspended again? And how is Ben Watson going to perform a year removed from the Achilles surgery? There's just so many questions on the you could literally fill a piece of paper with all the questions the Ravens have on offense right now. So as we sit here about 10 weeks away, are most of your questions for the Ravens leading towards the offense too at this point?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm like you said, you could fill a sheet of paper with all the offensive question marks. I think even with all of the offensive question marks, I feel as though they're not there's maybe 2 or 3 big question marks, like you said, like right tackle, the center position, potentially who's going to start at tight end if Ben Watson's not healthy, things like that. But otherwise, even though we do have a lot of question marks, I feel as though they're kind of smaller question marks, especially compared to years past. So if you eliminate the big question mark at right tackle and center, I feel like they're not in a huge problem state, I guess you could say. I feel as though, like you said, it's by far more question marks on the offensive side of the ball than the defensive side of the ball. But I don't think it's in that bad of a state, you know what I'm saying? So my biggest question mark is, personally, I think they might be okay. I would like to see them go out and sign a center. Ideally, if it were up to me, I'd rather see them go out and sign a Nick Mangold to play center than to see them go out and sign a right tackle. I think that it's going to be easier to find a right tackle in-house than it is going to be to have either Jensen or Urschel produce well at center, just because center is such a tough position to play. And especially when you throw in the defenses that you're going to face in the AFC North, even with Cleveland. I mean, Cleveland isn't going to have a slouch of a defense. So I feel as though going out and getting the Nick Mangold, that would be huge for the offensive line. And I think that the guys that they have on the roster, I think that they could do well enough at right tackle that they would do well. Other than that, I mean, I'm finding it. I'm going to find it interesting to see how the tight end position plays out, especially if Ben Watson can't come back to full health, to see how they play that out. So, but yeah, I definitely agree with you that the offensive side of the ball definitely has more question marks than the defensive side of the ball. I'm not, at this point, as long as, knock on wood, as long as we don't have any more injuries, I'm heading into camp and heading into the season, I'm not all that worried side of the ball. I think they're going to get a lot more pressure on the quarterback this year than they have in the years past. And I think the secondary will be able to hold up, especially if they pass rush is getting pressure on the quarterback. So I think the defense should be set.
Yeah, and then there's going to be the issue of who's going to be the kick returner, because we all know how that was a big issue last year.
Right. I mean, I think, personally, I think that the kick return job, I mean, we saw how big of a position it was when we had Jacoby Jones, but at the same time, I feel as though people, not just fans, but I feel like the media and even, I don't know if you could throw coaches in there or not. I feel like Harbaugh probably addresses it the right way. I think that over the past 2 or 3 years, basically since Jacoby Jones has left, I feel as though we've put too much into the return man job. And I feel like we've looked too much into, we have to find our return man and we have to find that guy that can do it for us just as good as Jacoby Jones does. When in reality, I mean, as long as you're putting a guy back there that's not putting the ball on the ground, I don't think it's going to be that big of a loss. I mean, as long as you're, like I said, as long as you're not putting the ball on the ground, I don't think, you look at a guy like Lardarius Webb, he's not going to be playing as consistently as he has in years past. I don't think Webb would be that bad of an option. Now that would be punt. He's never done kick returns, or if he has, it's been very, very minimal. I think a guy like Chris Matthews this year, and I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Keenan Reynolds makes the team this year. And if he's made strides in the return game, I think he's a possibility as well. But I think they're going to be all right in the return game this year, as long as they don't go out and sign a guy like Devin Hester that the fans called for. And I don't really think that there's anybody out there on the market right now that is strictly like married to their return possibilities. So I think one of the receivers or one of the defensive backs is probably going to end up getting that job. But like I said, I think we lately have been putting too much into the return man job. And I think, like I said, as long as they're not putting the ball on the ground, I think they should be okay.
Football season every year as it approaches, fans anticipate it, and this year especially with the Orioles absolutely skydiving to the ground right now.
Without a parachute.
Yes, without a parachute, and hopefully as we get closer to the trade deadline, some more moves are made with the Orioles, and we start to see a little bit of a sell mode going on. I think there's a much higher chance of it happening now than I did a couple weeks ago. It sounds like management is kind of starting kind of, I say that term very, very loosely, leaning in that direction a little bit. At least they're not saying they're buyers anymore, which they were a month ago. But with the Orioles doing what they're doing, the Baltimore and Ravens fans are anticipating the return of football season. Whether you're a Ravens fan or not, Tyler will be here all season long to help you with your fantasy games. So again, make sure to follow him on Twitter at Tyler_Feezer and keep checking out his articles at CharmCityBirdwatch.com. Follow us on Twitter at CharmCityBW. Like us on Facebook and Instagram. We will have all of our updates for you there as far as Tyler's article goes, and not just his, all of our articles at Charm City Birdwatch. Tyler, once again, thanks for coming on tonight, and best of luck to you, not only in your fantasy preparations, but just everything going on as summer begins to start winding down as we approach the final couple of days of July coming up.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. And like you said, anybody, even if you're not a Ravens fan or Orioles fan, anybody, I don't care if you're a Patriots fan, a Steelers fan, anybody, I'm more than happy to help anybody out, because fantasy is the game that brings every fan together. That's what makes it so great, and that's what makes Ravens and Steelers fans really come together and makes us forget about a rivalry sometimes. So more than happy to help any fan of any team out throughout the season. So good luck to everybody listening out there, and I look forward to helping everybody out.